D&D content creators, especially character optimizers, noticed pretty quickly in the 2024 rules that spells are very, very vague about how temporary hit points work. Now, the kind of abuse case that folks have noticed is you can cast polymorph, get like 100 plus temporary hit points, and then let the spell end and keep those temporary hit points. But I'm not sure if we have that rule right. The rule for temporary hit points in the 2024 rules is that they last until you complete your next long rest unless they have a specified expiration time. So like if you have an ability that gives you temporary hit points for 1 minute, they end at the end of 1 minute. Otherwise, they'll last until you complete your next long rest. Where things get complicated is the rules for durations on spells. Spells last until their duration expires, which means presumably that all of the effects of those spells end when the spell does. So if you cast polymorph, when polymorph ends, your temporary hit points should probably go away, and I do believe that is the intent of the rule. But where things get complicated is spells like False Life, spells with an instantaneous duration. Instantaneous spells, they do something immediately, and there are no lingering effect. False Life has an instantaneous duration, which means it creates temporary hit points. Since those temporary hit points don't have a listed duration, they expire at the end of your next long rest. There hasn't been any clarification from Wizards of the Coast on how are we supposed to handle this? Are we supposed to use the general rule for temporary hit points? Are we supposed to use the general rule for spellcasting durations? Because the two do seem to conflict. I believe the intent is that spells provide their temporary hit points until their duration expires, unless the spell is instantaneous, like False Life, in which case you default to the normal rule. But the rules as written sure is clear as mud.